Hi. Chapter 14, Streams to the River, River to the Sea. Miko liked the cradle board I made for him. He smiled the first time I put him in it, and when I took him out, he screwed up his face. That was good. Some babies in the Mandan village disliked the cradle boards, and this was a big burden because then their mothers had to carry them around whatever they were doing. With me, while I got things together for the long journey, I made an extra pair of moccasins as well as leggings. All I had to do was to hang Miko and his fur-lined cradleboard on a pole beside me. I never even had to worry about him until it was feeding time. When the ice broke up, I was ready. But just 3 days before we were to leave, 3 traders from Canada came to the village and asked to talk to Charbonneau. They talked for a long time. Afterward, he told me that the Canada men worked for the Northwest Company and were afraid that the Americans would ruin their trade with the Indians. That night, he woke me to say that there were many things about the journey he did not like. What? I asked him. What are they? Money, he said. Money not enough. Other things, high mountains, very high. I hear from old trader LeBlanc, long time ago. Also, many Indians, like Assiniboines and Blackfeet. Unfriendly people, these. Slit throat, take scalp quick. But you gave a promise to the captains, I said. Otter Woman was awake now. For a long time she had been telling me that it was foolish to go on such a dangerous journey among bad people and for such bad pay. Sleepily, she told him, "Do not listen. Go and say Charbonneau wishes more money, other things too." "I tell them," he said. "Charbonneau comes back if Charbonneau wishes. Any time if Toussaint Charbonneau wishes, he comes back." "Tell them," Otter Woman said. From the day Charbonneau was hired, the thought of going into the mountains where my people lived and seeing them again had warmed my heart. The thought of the journey itself, what it was about, what Captain Lark and Captain Lewis sought, and wherever the mysterious journey led, it excited me. "You gave a promise, though," I said. "You cannot quit now." He went the next morning to talk to the captains. At nightfall, he returned, angry and sullen, to say that he had had a fight with them. "I tell them goodbye," he said. "No more journey. Goodbye, Captain Clark. Goodbye, Captain Lewis. Goodbye." The next day, the truth came out. The captains had told him to leave and to never come back. Captain Clark even said that it was really me that they wanted, not as a guide, but as someone who could help him buy horses and find his way through Shoshone country. Charbonneau brooded for a while. Brooding means that he was doing this. I begged him to go and talk to the captains again. "Why do they want someone who quits somewhere along the trail if he feels like it?" I asked him. "If you were Captain Clark, would you want someone like that? And if you quit, it will give you a bad name on the river." Otter Woman kept at him too, but she did everything she could to keep him from going. She liked her easy life traveling from one village to another, visiting places and people. But I talked too, and at last he went back to Captain Clark and said that he was not mad anymore. He would like to go with them now. As soon as this was over, I put everything I had made during the long winter for myself and Miko into a deerskin bag. I put the baby and his cradleboard on my back. I said goodbye to Otter Woman, who was very pleased to be left behind. Every day, Captain Clark made black marks in a thing he called a journal. He made the marks with a stick he dipped in black paint. He said the marks were words that told everything he had seen or heard or thought that day. When I went down to the river, he was there, sitting in one of the big boats. His journal was in his lap. He motioned me to put down the bag and the cradleboard and to sit beside him. He opened the journal, wet the stick, and put it in my hand. He put his arm around my shoulder and took my hand and guided it over the paper. These are the things that we put in the journal together. Fort Mandan, April the 7th, 1805, Sunday at 4:00 p.m. The boat, in which were 6 soldiers, 2 Frenchmen, and an Indian, all under the command of a corporal who had the charge of dispatches and company, and a canoe with 2 Frenchmen set out down the river for St. Louis. At the same time, we set out on our voyage up the river in 2 pirogues and 6 canoes. That was all I wrote while Captain Clark guided my hand. I looked at the marks as they ran back and forth on the page. I felt very proud of myself. Not until much later, when I began to learn more about the white man's language, did I know what all the marks meant. Captain Clark wrote some more in his journal. I saw the word Janie, the name he had given to me. He quickly sprinkled the words with sand to dry them off. I suppose they had something to do with me. The big silver boat that looked like a gull went down the river. Captain Lewis fired his swivel guns to say goodbye to the Mandans, and we went fast up the river. Near nightfall, everyone waded to shore, and I was sent out to dig roots for supper. Both of the big boats, the pirogues, were stored with food, but Captain Clark planned to use it only if nothing else could be found on land. I was sent out because Charbonneau had said, when the captain hired him, that he should have more money because I, his wife, knew how to gather berries and all kinds of roots. Finding roots was easy. I had been doing it since I was a child. The first thing to know is where to look. The best place is around piles of driftwood. You take a sharp stick and poke until you come upon a mouse hole. Always in the hole, except at the end of winter, you will find a nest of roots from the camas bush that the mice have stored up. The roots are as big as your thumb, white and round. They are good tasting if they are cooked with deer meat or a buffalo hump. It was the end of winter and the mice had eaten most of their store, so I had to dig long after dark. I dug enough roots for more than 3 dozen men. That's a lot. It is best when cooking camas roots to dig a pit and put hot stones on the bottom and cover them with willow branches and lay the roots on top. You put more branches on and heap them with earth. You build a fire and let it burn until you can tell by the good smells that the roots are done. It takes almost 2 days to do this. Since the men were hungry, I just boiled the roots. I dug them and cooked them because I wanted to please Captain Clark. But Charbonneau was angry. He said to Captain Clark at supper, "Me and wife Bird Girl get no pay for cook, for talk, for guide. No cook." Janie wanted to dig the roots and cook them, Captain Clark said. The men usually cook for themselves. "Good," Captain Charbonneau said. Afterward, he said to me, "You no cook. Find roots. No cook. See?" I was not displeased. To cook for 3 dozen hungry men was more than I could do. We passed a Minnetaree village early the next morning, the one Le Borgne ruled over. The river runs narrow here, past a low cliff, and he was watching for us as we came out of the mist. He raised his hand and pointed at a large pile of meat on the bank beside him. "Buffalo!" he shouted. "Welcome to good eating! Welcome, friends!" Captain Clark shouted back, but when Charbonneau, who was steering, turned toward shore, Captain Clark grabbed the rudder and kept us headed straight. It was well that he did, for when we floated by and left Le Borgne standing on the bank, a shower of arrows from the cliff fell upon us. They were trying to trick him. For the first time, I wondered about Charbonneau. He had heard the horrible tale about Le Borgne. He knew that the one-eyed chieftain could not be trusted and that he hated white men. Knowing this, why had Charbonneau tried to steer the boat ashore into the hands of an enemy? Only a few days later, less than a week, I wondered even more about him. He was at the rudder of our pirogue when a gust of wind struck us and wrested the rudder from his grip. But instead of taking hold of the rudder again, he raised his hands and began to pray. The other boats were farther up the river. Cruzat, the bowsman, shouted at Charbonneau, "Turn her, you fool!" Charbonneau was still praying when Cruzat shouted again, "Turn her!" They're referring to the boat as a her. Charbonneau was on his knees, clinging to the pirogue with one hand. "Turn!" Cruzette shouted again. "Turn her or I'll shoot you!" He pointed a gun at Charbonneau's head. Charbonneau pulled hard at the rudder, but the boat stayed sideways. The sails flapped and we tilted. Water rushed in and it swept around my knees. The baby started to cry. I saw that the shore was not far away and that I could reach it. Then I saw that our stores had begun to drift out of the boat. Charbonneau just watched them drift, but did not move. Cruzette seized the rudder. We were floating with the current now, and around us in a wide circle, the water was covered with the stores that had drifted out of the boat. I saw Captain Clark's journal and a wooden box that held something he valued. He took it out of the box every day, looked at it, and then carefully put it back in. Someone shouted from the shore. Waves were beating so loud against the boat I couldn't hear what they were saying, but it had a warning sound. The cradle board had loosened. I tightened the cord that bound it to my shoulders, and I let myself into the water. It came up higher than my waist, but the first thing I gathered in was the wooden box. Then I grasped the journal that I had written in once and that Captain Clark wrote in every day. A wave broke over our heads, and the baby began to cry. So I gave up and I climbed back in the boat. I got safely to land, but we lost most of our medicine, gunpowder, flour, and melon seeds that Captain Clark was going to plant somewhere, and many other things besides some of our beads and presents for people along the way. But I did save his journal and his wooden box. He was pleased to see them when he came back that night. "Good as new," he said, opening the box. "I have a small one, but this is by far the best." "What is it?" I asked him. "It's a compass. You can tell whether you are traveling north or south or east or west. Otherwise, you get lost." He was so pleased that he kissed me on the cheek, and he gave me a beautiful gift. It was an antelope belt sewn with rows of tiny blue beads. It was so beautiful that my throat choked up and I couldn't even thank him. After supper, I asked Charbonneau why he had not obeyed Cruzette. "Hear nothing," he said. "Hear wind, hear water, no hear Cruzette." A tight look around his mouth made me think he was telling a lie. He had heard Cruzette. "You think something?" he asked me, clenching his hands. "You think Charbonneau here, huh?" I shook my head. But I began to wonder. I remembered the day the traders had talked to him, and how that night he had told me that they were afraid the Americans would ruin their business. How the next day he had told Captain Clark he would not go with him, and how the very next day he had changed his mind and decided to go. Was it possible that he had some secret with the Canadian traders? Had they hired him to make trouble? "You think things?" he asked, still clenching his hands. "Nothing," I said. "You jump in river, near drown. Jean-Baptiste near drown. Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau worth more than captains, more than Bird Girl. Anybody. See?" "Yes," I said. If his son meant that much to him, why had he tried to destroy the boat and take the chance that Miko might drown? Why had he sat with his hands in the air and prayed, deaf to Cruzette's commands? I did not dare to ask him. "What do you think?" he said. "You think Charbonneau hear Cruzette, huh?" "No," I said. "Good," he said, and unclenched his fists. "Good." And that's the end of chapter 14. The story's getting good, isn't it?